realize that it's going across the mic.
I just started the recording, so continue.
Yeah, I just got a
Lori
thing
was-
flashed.
Yeah, Lori made the recommendation some while ago about something else. Oh, the individual camera focus. I never did find that. Well, I didn't write down the location for that software you mentioned, Lori. Perhaps you could talk about that now before we get started.
Okay, well, that was the spotlighting, right?
Yeah,
Was that spotlighting? That should be in Zoom. You as a, I'm assuming that Paul, you are the one that's hosting the Zoom, or is Wendell hosting it?
no, I am hosting it.
Okay, then you as the hoster should have access to, just let me go, give me a second, I'll go find the instructions again. It's real short. I'll be right back.
Okay.
I see we got another person showing up. We got 4 minutes.
Yeah, that's Paul Byron is a guest today. He's from our Toronto chapter, Wendell.
Okay.
He just joined.
Hi,
and-
Paul.
Hello.
It's a new face to me. Well, they're all new faces to me.
Yeah.
And if people leave their audio off, all I see is a name. So it's
That's
nice
right.
to put a face to that name. I see Ray is here. He's down in Florida enjoying the nice weather.
Well, hello,
Morning.
Wendell.
Hi, Ray.
You want a face to go with it? I'll give you a quick one. There you go. That's it.
What's the temperature down there today?
Oh, I forget. It's warm. It's too hot.
Oh,
Actually, we just had a shower. They
I
last
could,
about they last about 20 minutes and then they go away.
many years ago when I was a young fella, somebody come up with this crazy idea, because I'm from Nova Scotia, and we have a lot of fog, that you could buy canned fog as a novelty item.
You were selling it. Yep.
Yeah, so Ray, why don't you can up some warm sunshine and start peddling it?
I tried that a few years ago. They wanted to arrest me for false advertising, but
Yeah,
it sounds
once
like
they
a
open the
plan.
can, they can't prove what's in the can unless they open it, and once they open it, the evidence is gone.
That's true, eh? It's the same thing with the fog.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't see John Deland on today.
No, not as yet. He may join.
Oh, okay. Anyway,
He said-
have a good session. I'll just monitor and enjoy the monitoring. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you.
You're right. I see Paul, Lori sent you that link to,
Okay.
if you look on the chat, you'll see it. So Paul, what's your background with clocks? Are you just starting, or?
Paul Byron. Yeah, yes, yes and no. I've had mechanical clocks for a long time. My grandfather actually owned a jewelry store and was a clock shop in London, Ontario, at the corner of Dundas and Richmond, many years ago. And as a young boy, I recall being fascinated with the clocks in his store, and actually I inherited one of his grandfather clocks that I recall being in his living room. So that's sort of a family history that got me interested and excited about it. And then and I've collected, I probably have 10 or 12 clocks in total, nothing really outstanding or super highly collectible. I tend to buy them because I like the looks of them and I can picture them somewhere in my house, is sort of how I get at it. Yeah.
What about repairing? Where do you stand as far as repairing clocks?
Very little. I'm not so bad at taking them apart, but putting them back together is the hard part.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, I guess we might as well get started, Paul.
Yeah, Wendell, I'll read that article later and we'll discuss the article later, but yeah, go ahead for now. You have the floor.
I'll look for my notes. I guess Paul and I had some discussion because before we were just kind of doing piecemeal stuff, and then my tube clock is decided to make some noise. That's a 9 tube clock from about the 1920s. Okay, so what we decided to do was kind of start in the beginning, and then we'll give people like a good idea of the background. And because you probably all read the email, so we're going to cover all the basic theories like the escapements and how a clock actually keeps time, and pendulums, suspensions, and all that. So we're looking at least 6 sessions to kind of cover that theory, and then that can be applied to all clock movements. So today we're starting off with tools. Now I'm going to warn you, I have more tools than you need. I actually, like, I didn't have anybody to go to when I started many years ago. I've been around clocks since the early 90s. And at this point, I'm probably approaching 525 clocks in my own collection. So like I have a good cross section of pretty near any kind of clock you can imagine. So I started off buying tools in the 90s, and I didn't know much about it. So I ended up buying tools that really weren't of much use in today's clock repair standards. You know, they were old, some of them were worn out, and I didn't know the difference. So I ended up with some tools that you don't really need. And sometimes I have old tools that there's much better modern replacements that do a lot more for you. So we're kind of go through all the different tools that I have. Again, don't think you need all these tools because you don't. But there is some basic tools that you need. So I'll give you, let's cover a little bit of background first. Now, I've written a bunch of articles because I started a clock club here in the Maritimes. And I've concluded that there's 4 basic levels of clock repairers. Like the level 1 would be what I call the oiler, because all he's doing or she is basically anything they can do without taking the movement apart, which doesn't cover very much. You know, you do a little bit of cleaning, I suppose, put some oil on it, and you hope for the best. And a number of clocks you can get running, but just because a clock runs doesn't mean it's in good repair, because you can almost get any clock running for a short period of time. So then level 2 is what I call a basic repair, which is the level that most people will want to achieve, where you do a full dismantle, you do bushings, you polish the pivots, you fix the springs, you know, you can do all the adjustments. And then level 3 is advanced repair, where you're actually able to make replacement parts. Like if it needs a new escapement, if it needs like in the Gilbert clocks, there's a small brass pinion that usually cracks, you know, you can hand file one of those. So and you can replace a pivot if one is broke. So that's the advanced repair. And then level 4 is where you actually build a clock moving from scratch. And you literally make everything except for the spring and any cabling that would be used. So, and each one of those levels has a set of tools that works with it, because you can't build a clock without very special tools for deciding where the pivot location is and that. So we'll cover some of that. And then the next thing that you need to keep in mind, what amount of to what percentage of clocks you want to be able to repair. Let's say and I decided in the beginning that I wanted to repair all the clocks. That's just my nature. So what I did is every time I come across a clock that something was broke, I went out and bought the tools necessary to fix it. That can be expensive, and it can create quite a large amount of tools. So you have to decide that, because the first 75% of clocks, of movements that come to you, are relatively easy to repair. Because the normal things you're going to repair are pivot holes, pivots, springs, striking mechanisms, and bead adjustment. That's pretty well all clocks you take apart are going to require repairs in those areas. Now, the top 25% might need a gear replacement, might need a pivot, might be worn so bad it needs to be replaced. So again, those will take different tools, and you'll have to decide that up front, what level you want to achieve and what percentage of clocks you want to repair. So my recommendation is most people would probably want to achieve a level 2, and the basics that you need for level 2 is some way to do bushings. Some people do them by hand with a round file and put the bushings in. It takes a lot more skill level to do that than it does if you're using a bushing tool. I have a Bergeron bushing tool, which I'll show you. And you need a lathe or some way to polish your pivots and file them down if they have ridges in them, and some way to make custom bushings. You need a spring winder. It's just too hard on the hands and fingers to try to do them by hand. And then there's a lot of little hand tools that we'll look at that you'll need. Now, a lot of people, when they decide to work on clocks, for instance, if Simon's not here today, but his background is engineering, so he come to clock repairing with a lot of skills that a lot of people wouldn't have. Like, he understands gears and things like that. So the more skill levels you have in other areas makes it much easier to work on clocks. For instance, if you're a mechanic, a lot of mechanics work on clocks. Machinist. And if you just like to learn new things, you like to be challenged, you have attention to detail, all those things will help you. Okay, so let's start looking at the different tools. And what I'll do with each tool is I'll relate it back to a clock level that I believe that it's useful for in doing that. So I'm going to flip the camera off me so you'll not see me again. So I have two cameras. I have one at an angle, and then I have my cell phone, which I can use for magnification. This is probably my best friend because it's just a Sharpie pen, and I'm always putting marks on it if I want to count the number of teeth or things, and that wipes off very easily with any type of solvent. So like I use that a lot. Measuring tools. There's a dial. This is called a dial indicator or a dial caliper for measuring dimensions. This one's in thousandths of an inch. For instance, that's 2.97, 297 thou. And then I have an electronic one because all the bushing stuff you're doing is in millimeters. So this will go millimeters or inches in thousandths of an inch. So I use it. That's usually out by my bushing tool. So you need some way to measure accurately. magnification headpieces. This is I wear these all the time. I'm working on clocks, so I have this is a around $100 one, and these are true glass. They're not plastic, so I can wear this all day and it doesn't hurt my eyes. And this is an extra magnification that you roll down if you want to do more close-ups. Now this is a number 5, and I actually have 2 of them, which this one's a number 10, and that's as high as they go, but the depth is only a few inches, where I find this one a comfortable distance from what I'm looking at. So it's important to have something that's really comfortable on that. And then oils. I made this little wooden stand. So this is a 80-40, so that's my heavier oil for grandfather clocks. My 80-30 for medium clocks, and this is a natural grease for greasing star wheels and whatnot. This is an 859 for cuckoo clocks, and this is 90-10, which is
chicken feet and these a lot?
Not a lot.
Why?
so this is 90-10. I use it for pocket watches and platform balances. It's very fine oil. And these things that you're seeing, they're called oilers, and the heavier oil has a bigger end. So you stick it in the tube. You can see the flat end. That's the bigger one. And then the finer one, because you want less oil. So I have that for just a little wooden thing for my different oils and greases. And I had showed you before, I use these plastic trays. These are plastic trays, and I like the ones with 3 rows. And in this particular one, the dividers come out because sometimes I have long one, but it's 3 rows of 6, and that covers all the gears. And then like this would be a 3-gear train, so I keep my gears organized when I'm doing it. And then I have these smaller ones. These are ice cube trays. This is for smaller movements that I can keep the gears in to keep them organized. All this stuff is for pretty well basic. Let-down keys. This is the set of let-down keys that I use. And this is also used in my spring winder. Key sizes have a number. This is 7 and 8. This set goes from 1 to 2. You just put in, lock it, then you can hold it and it will slide through your hands. Now you can get a very fancy, I seen this on eBay one day, and even though I had one, I seen this nice Bergeron set, but it was going really cheap, so I ended up buying it. And it has a rubber sleeve that actually turns unless you grip it on the shaft, but it goes right down to a number 0. And it goes as big as number 22. And you can also use it for winding. This piece goes in the end so you can actually turn it. So it's kind of a neat thing. If you like tools, well, you end up buying this stuff that I didn't need it, but I already had one, but because you need some way to control the spring for letting the power down. The other thing that you'll need is spring locks with different size springs, because you have to be able to clamp them some way. Now you can use wire, you can use hose clamps. These work very efficiently. They there's even little tiny ones. I used this one the other day for a swing clock I was working on, had a very small spring. So I actually have a whole drawer full of them. You'll need lots of those. Now, I'm gonna take my my camera. These are all the different, like this long pair of tweezers I use for taking screws down deep into a clock. And there's all kinds of specialized tweezers. Here's one that you can clamp a shaft. There's tweezers in here. Believe it or not, most of these I never use very often. This one I use for, it's a nice one. I use it for pocket watches or balances. This is the one that I use all the time, just for general work. This is a nice wide one I use for straightening escape wheel teeth. And then I also have an aluminum one, a heavy duty one for doing stuff like that. Then I have some very delicate ones. They have a fiber end that won't mark. There's various hooks. I use this hook a lot if I'm reaching in on cuckoo clocks for pulling things. Punches. Here's a pivot pusher and puller. This tool will get you into a lot of trouble if you don't use it properly, because if you try pulling and pushing on pivots, you're going to bend them. A pivot should always go in the hole very easily. If you're having to push or pull on it hard, means you have too much pressure with your fingers on the plates. These are different things for bending wires. Like there's a heavy one with a big groove. There's 3 different sizes. And then there's a finer one with a finer groove. My 3 pairs of pliers I use, my different screwdrivers, small ones, big ones. This is a clamp. Sometimes I use to hold a gear in place, because you can clamp onto it and lock it. It has a groove on the end. This is an old file that I made into a scratching awl because it's hard steel. A set of parallel jaw pliers. Very parallel means when they open and close, they go parallel. That's important to have. A little hand vise. If I can move. These are little pry bars. I have little tiny ones, big ones. Now, these are bending pliers. They have a groove and a round pivot. If you're bending a spring or you want to bend a piece of metal, various sizes of more pliers than what anybody really needs. I think these are called hemostats. They're locking things so you can clamp onto a wheel or anything and lock onto it and hold it in place temporarily. Sometimes I clamp onto a string or a chain in a cuckoo clock to hold it. And then this is an important thing to have, a screwdriver that you can clamp onto the screws to hold them in place. I have 3 or 4 different ones of those. This is a tool I like. This is for actually pocket watch bows, for bending the curve in them. You can see when you apply any number of I have this tool here. This is a magnifier. I always carry this with me any place I go when I'm traveling, in case I want to look up close at something. So let's see where we are on our list. So movement plate standoffs. I have multiple different size ones of those. These are 4-inch. I use these on modern grandfather clock movements. Excuse me, so that the hammers don't get bent. And then you can use these shorter ones. I make these myself, but you can buy them. Sometimes they're fairly expensive. Another thing that I'll put you back in the clamp here. Another thing that comes in handy, sometimes you get creative on like if I got let's say this is a seat board on a clock. Well, I can set it on those two, and it's up high enough that the chains or anything won't get in. But sometimes I have an old movement. I have another big piece of pipe that I can set the movement on. So you'll find creative ways to hold movements. This is another tool. My stand is giving me grief. This is another tool that's good, but it can get you in a lot of trouble. It's called a plate spreader. You clamp a inside each one, and then you can actually pry it open or close, but you'll also bend the plates if you're not careful. So I use it sparingly. And on the other side of mine, there's a knot. I'll just open it up here a bit. So you can fit the pivots in each one of those notches. And then I can, well, that one you can see actually has some. You can put it in your vise. You know, you can see the wobble, so it comes in handy that way. So, but they do come in handy, and they're good if you use them properly.
It's a tool that you have made.
No, I bought that.
Thanks.
I showed this tool the other day. This I use for repairing springs. It's a hole punch. You put the metal in. I'll show you on a piece of aluminum. There I punches a nice, and I demonstrate how to repair springs the other day. So that's the tool. That's like a $50 tool at Princess Auto, and it's worth its weight in gold. There's a 3/32, an 1/8, 5/32, a 3/16, 7/32, a quarter, and 9/32 hole that you can punch using that tool. So it works really good in springs for when the hole breaks. Ultrasonic cleaners, that's a whole topic. I actually have two. I have a small one and a big one, but I've only ever used them a couple times. I find the problems they create, especially with water-based cleaners. So to me, that's the last thing that you would buy if you had $2,000 or $3,000 you wanted to spend. Movement stands. You can get nice metal movement stands. Okay, this is a movement stand here. And it's made so that your plates fit. And then if you had sometimes you can't clamp a whole width. So you can clamp that and hold your movement in it. And it actually has a piece on the top that you could clamp a movement just by one edge. And they have adjustable feet, so you can actually put the clock and beat. This is the one that I use all the time. I actually altered it. Instead of using the groove, I machined these pieces that they have a small groove in them. And you notice they're loose and adjustable because a lot of times there's interference in a clock movement, like the flies or whatnot, that you have to run them. So I use that one all the time, because after I do a movement, I'll run it overnight before I put it in the case, just to make sure that there's no issues. And you'll make, like I have these that I made, and I can screw them into the side. And then I have other little ones that I made special for a certain movement, because there was a piece that stuck out here, and I put the metal on it so that it wouldn't slide off. I have another one somewhere, but I don't know where it is. Anyway, you'll come up with those things as you electronic beat setter. I couldn't live without this. It's it can do a lot of things. They are worth a fair amount of money. I think the basic, now this is the micro set, but I use it for checking escape wheel teeth, putting clocks in beat, because you can listen to them. You can use them for pocket watches. You can actually get a computer program to run in your laptop that it will keep track of the striking. It's unlimited what it will do, but I couldn't live without it. It gives a percentage of the beat. So I've used this several times in doing demonstrations. This is a clock depthing tool. You put your wheels fit in here, and then you can adjust the depth and the spacing. And it's got different ends. For the last time I used it, I was checking a spring barrel. That's why it has the big ends, and the small ends work for small pivots. That tool, it helps you solve some complicated problems. It probably not a level 2 tool. They're fairly pricey. They can be upwards of $1,000, the ones for clocks. Now there is this was one that I got, but I washed it in hot water and it shrunk. No, just kidding. It's for pocket watches or platform balances. It's the same idea, a depthing tool, it's just much smaller because you're dealing with smaller pieces. So depending on if you're building clocks, you can't get away without having this, because that's why the points are on the end. So once you get the proper depths, you can actually scribe. You can scribe with the points on the brass to identify where you should drill the hole for your pivot. So it's one of those tools that helps you find problems that nothing else will do. Other thing that I use a lot is pegwood. I actually have, like, here's a piece that's that's been sharpened and it's actually dirty. There you can see the dirt from pegging out the pivot holes. So you buy it in a bundle, and then you can get these pith wood, you can get the big discs, and you can see like on small pivots, I put a cleaning solution on it, then I just punch it in and out to clean the actual pivot and the shoulder in this. I imagine you can still, here's one that you can see the holes in it. So you can see I've used it a lot for pocket watches or. You pretty well need some type of a wood. You'd have to be careful if you use pine or something like that, because there's pitch in pine that might get transferred to the pivot holes. It might cause you a problem. So if you're thinking of making your own. Now, punches and anvils. I have a whole tray of different punches, sharp ones, flat ones. Because I did machining work, well, some of them I just brought in from my my machining stuff. So I have you're always marking something and you want to drill a hole. And I have this anvil. And this is called a crow's foot, because a lot of times if you want to work on something, like you can actually slide that in the groove and you could punch the cap off of that lantern pinion. So it comes in handy. And then the little anvil. You need something. Now I have another piece of metal that I use. It's just a big solid block of metal. It's flat. Because if you want to flatten something. Taps and dies. I have this micro tap and die set. It's a cheap reproduction, and you have to be very careful they break. But if you buy a Bergeron set of tap and dies, these micro ones, you're looking at thousands. I do some pocket watch stuff, but not a great deal, and that's where you would use that. I have a big set that's metric and a big set that's imperial that I have out in the other room, which I'll show you after. Sometimes you make your own tools. This was one that I demonstrated before for holding escapements for measuring. I made all that from scratch. And this is a neat one that I seen a picture of. Like you can put round stuff in the groove, or if you want it to work, you can clamp that if you wanted to do some filing. It's just an easy way to hold it. Or some, now this round piece, there's a groove on the end, and you can put it any place, and so now it's held so that you can file or do what you need to do. Small pieces are always hard to hold, so you'll make those pieces as you see fit if you have the tools, and the more tools you have, the more of that kind of thing you can actually make from scratch. There's different cleaning solvents. I use a lot of this. It almost dries instantly, leaves no residue. It's a lighter fluid for lighters. The bad part with this is very dangerous, very flammable, and smells bad. So usually in the summertime, I take it outside and use it. So, but you can use Varsol is another good one There's no water in it. This was something that I purchased recently. I just dropped all my paperwork. This is a clock staking tool set. I bought it from J. Malcolm Wild in Great Britain. He's not making them anymore. He's getting quite old, but because I want to build a clock, which I'm doing next winter, I'll use this for working. And there's all kinds of different stakes and stumps and different things for. That's not a really necessary tool, but one of those nice to have if you know you want to keep working on clocks. It's nice. Now you can buy. Now this is my K&D set, which is American. It's the same type of affair. Like you got all the stumps. Mostly this was made for watches and pocket watches. This particular one has the jewel micrometer that you can press out jewels and put them back, and it has all the cutters. So these are quite common on eBay. Hard to find one that's complete. I had to buy a couple to get most of the pieces. And there's a book that tells you what each one of those the stakes tells you what they do. So I think you need some kind of a staking set. This is kind of a neat tool. I bought this when I was teaching myself how to make, it's actually a measuring tool. I don't know if we can see inside that. Okay, there you can see. It's got all the, you can measure angles, you can measure distance. It has a built-in light and a glass bottom, so it's kind of neat if you want to do precise measurements of small pieces or measure angles. I used it when I was measuring, because 2 winters ago I had to make a anchor escapement from scratch. I designed it and drew it out and made it, so it come in handy for that. Another thing that's very handy is a small bench vise. You can see all the filings around it. It's clamped right to the vise. It's only probably a 2.5 inch or a 2-inch one. Very handy to have. You're always wanting to cut something off, or straight edge, like a small straight edge is. I use, this is only a 6-inch one. I use it for checking plates to make sure, if I want to measure a plate, just to make sure it's flat, measure at different angles. So a small one of those is nice to have. Small set of screwdrivers. Like I have 2 sets. I have a cheap set, and I seem to want to use them all the time. I don't know why, because the ends are not great. And then this is a nice Bergeron set, and they're all color coded, and there's actually spare bits. But again, these are worth hundreds. But you do need some kind of a good quality jeweler's screwdriver set. Especially if you're doing platform balance, like ship's clock always have a platform balance. Some clocks have platform balances that you have to work on, so you need that. A good dust blower, you just squeeze it and for blowing dust, mostly for small parts. I have a whole drawer full of different clamps for clamping onto stuff. Big for holding them by hand. You'll end up after a while having a whole bunch of that. This is a tool that I bought, found it at an antique shop. It's for putting crystals in. I actually just used it last week for my my swing clock. It had a size 48 crystal, so you can you put your piece in here and then you put the plunger in, and for the plastic crystals you can bend them enough to put them in the bezel. I think I paid like $45 for this. I have a big one. You've probably seen a lot of the big ones where you hold them, they sit on the floor, but I thought this was nice. It's a nice little handheld one. This isn't necessarily tools, but it is a tool. This is spring wire, brass spring wire, and you get an assortment of it, and it's all different diameters, because a lot of times you have to make springs. They seem to, some of that brass wire breaks easy. This is also more for when you're building. This is a magnifier center punch. So what you can do is you can look through it, and it has a crosshair, and then you can look through the magnifier and center it perfect. And then you pull that out, and then you put in the punch, and you put a mark for doing precise measurement for a center punch. It seems like the more tools you get, the more you want to have, or you see something neat. These are nice. I use these because sometimes you get steel cut pinions that are all rusted. And these fiberglass, that's fiberglass. Man, as that stuff gets in your fingers, it's just like little steel slivers. I find if I put oil on it and use that, then the oil keeps the little pieces from getting around, but it's nasty stuff. But it's the only thing I know of that cleans a lot of that rust out of the pinions, and then you can polish them after. They, you can get them at, they sell them at Perrins. Actually, this is the one that I use. I think I get at Perrins, and it has a refill, and you can screw it in and out. They call this piercing, and there's one of the problems with these little blades. They break easy. Most people buy them by the dozens. These little small, you drill a hole and you can put it in, and they're made for cutting steel. If you had to make a new clock wheel, you can use that to cut out the spaces. Again, a lot of time that's used if you're making parts. Soldering equipment. I use this little micro. It's an automatic lighter, because a lot of times you're you just need a small flame, so that's good. And I have a big, like a household propane torch for doing regular stuff. This is a nice thing to have. It's some kind of insulating board, and you can see how in the burning, so it doesn't for doing soldering and whatnot, because you have to be careful. This is an old piece of clock spring. You can see where I heated it up. The blue was where I took the temper out of it. So you need something that's safe to solder on. This is a neat tool. It's very old, but it still works. It's a demagnetizer. So what it has a finger. So, and then you can feel the pulling when I hold that in, and then you pull it away slowly, because very often your screwdrivers and different pieces will get magnetized. So you need some way of demagnetizing them. So it, without having like something like that. Different glues, you can get. I just seen my other tap, and this is my other metric tap and die set that I bought it from Perrins, and it has the male and female cutters. They're not bad. They're not super expensive. They go from 2.5 down to 1, and 440 down to 0090 for the Imperial. I use those quite often for the small stuff. And I had to replace some clock faces. This is a circle cutter for paper. When you're replacing some clock faces, you can adjust. And there's a sharp blade that you can see in the end for cutting them. So that comes in handy when you're replacing the face on the clock. This one I had shown before. This is for measuring the depth. In a spring barrel, there's an ideal amount. If you have too much spring in a barrel, it won't work properly. And if you have too little, it doesn't run long enough. And this is used for quickly measuring how much. There's an example that's showing you're actually measuring. So at B, that's the appropriate place where the coiled up spring should be. So you can kind of tell, because with clocks, you never know, because most of them are many years old, so you never know what was done. Somebody may have put the wrong spring in it or something. So it comes in handy to know that. This was another tool we had actually talked about the other day. This is made more for building clocks. It's used as a depthing tool, has an adjustment on it for setting up pinions and clock wheels before they're put on arbors to get a depth. And then there's points down at the bottom that you can scratch their position. Again, that's for building clocks. This is something that's kind of neat. I use it quite often. It's you can look in 3D, you can put something down here and then you can magnify it. Especially if you're inspecting small parts or escape wheels, or so they're nice to have where you're not just using one eye, you can actually use both eyes. Something else that you need to have levels. This is my favorite little level that I use all the time. And then for clock cases, because if you put a clock in a case, it may be installed crooked. So you have to put it in beat and you make sure, like my desk is perfectly level. So when I set the clock case on there, because you always have to put it in beat after you put the movement back in the case. So levels are important. I'll just, like I have drawers here with full of tools, you know, different hammers, you know, you have micro hammers. Well, I actually have, this is one of those things I bought that I really didn't need, but it's just a little tiny micro hammer. Sometimes it doesn't take much of a tap to solve something. So this drawer is full of all kinds of little gear puller. This is springs and files. These are clamps. You can put them in a vise, they spread open, and then you can clamp onto a shaft and you put it in a vise to hold it so you don't mark it. And I have two different sizes of them. And these little tiny anvils for working on stuff. I have several of them. Here's a clock key measuring tool. And here's a big metal block for pounding on. I'm getting into some of my pocket. This is a pocket watch drawer. This is for doing joules, for transferring the heat. This is a balance for poising the balance. This one has ruby jaws. This is a hand puller. These are letdown keys for pocket watches. This is a Canon pinion tightener. A lot of times you'll buy tools, you'll buy a bunch of tools, and you won't know what you're getting until you get it home. And sometimes you'll find nice stuff, and sometimes you won't. So this is another drawer. Tools. I have a key set. Too many pieces to go into individually. Should get yourself some painter's green tape, because a lot of times you're taping things up. For instance, my Atmos clock here, I got apart, and you can see where I tape the glass, especially carriage clocks. When you take them apart, the glass will fall in. So I always tape them, and that green tape won't leave any marks. So it's handy to have. And then if you want to get into Atmos clocks, you have to buy all these special tools. These are all the special tools for working on Atmos clocks. I've never taken one apart yet. I have 3 Atmos clocks and one of them quit working. So that's my project that I'm doing some studying and trying to decide the best approach for it. This is an interesting tool. It's called a dappling. I think that's what they call it, a dappling tool. So you pick out, I use this mostly for making my own curved brass washers or for changing them, because you've got different size dapples, so you can put the curve in them that you want. You know, you can even go really small. So that's kind of a nice thing to have. And it's good to get yourself some cheap cotton gloves. The thinner the better. I couldn't find any real thin ones. So when you're handling brass, especially grandfather clock movements and whatnot, it's nice to have. So I'm going to go over to the other room. I'm just gonna do this quickly because we're getting. Looking at technical technology, training, up to 586, 13.5. A lot of times we're doing small steps. And this is something that's very important. This person away, and this is a dominant. Last time I used this, there is a size in the in the pallet. I had started doing the pallet that I had been made. So I used this here, just a blinding thing. Like, I'm blind and good. You can put it on there and see it, so it actually fuck, and then they cover it through and then the pallet. It's exactly because when these kind of like gravy.
Mr. Wendell, the sound is not good.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Wendell.
Wendell, can you hear me?
Different colleges, it's just if they literally creating colleges for figure. I was looking into the one on the internet. Really tiny ones for the college things. This kind of thing, that's something different. It's very important. Different other things, I think you use it very much before in the ways that are pivot, because the American from one part there down the middle part.
Wendell, can you hear me?
This is the. I think my good Paul Yellen. You yelling at me, Paul?
Hello, Wendell?
Yeah?
When you went in the other room, your sound got all distorted and it was very difficult to understand you.
Oh,
I don't know
'Cause
what happened.
I would have been using the sound from my,
Portable.
from my cell phone. Oh, that's too bad. So it wasn't usable at all?
I don't think anybody could understand it.
Hmm.
The visual was fine, but the auditory was garbled.
So what do I do with that now? Because I was using, because I'm okay, I've got a solution.
Mute your portable.
I'll take my laptop with me.
Sure.
I didn't take the laptop with me, and I did something that I didn't test, which wasn't very good. Okay, how's the audio now?
It's still good.
Okay. So do you want me to go back over kind of what I did? Or?
I think that would be helpful.
So where did I start? Oh, I started at, okay, micro drill set. There's a set that I bought, this goes from size 33 up to a size 80 twister. 80 is 13.5 thou. They're pretty tiny. But they have twist drills, so I use them quite a bit for different applications. Then my diamond sharpening. This fits in a drill, and you put the diamond paste on this wheel. I used it for, well, I use it to sharpen in these carbide for working on the lathe. And then I also use them for, I had to recut a set of Volmer pallets for a Gustav Becker movement. They had adjustable pallets in it, and the angles were wrong, so I recut them on this, and the clock is working fine. So that's and my small drill press, and it's just a Canadian Tire one, and then a way to hold whatever you're drilling. A lot of times you want to drill a hole, and I don't like drilling them by hand because sometimes the drills catch, especially in brass. So we use that. These are two items that I made. I seen them someplace. They're called preachers. What I did is I took bolts on my lathe and sharpened them. So the front of the triangle piece fits into your pivot hole, and then you just tap these two, and then it makes two marks. So if you mess up the pivot hole, you can always reclaim it. So I made a big one and a little one for, sometimes you get a pivot hole that's really badly abused and it's wrong. So at least you can mark it. So there was an article I seen, they call them preachers. I have no idea why. Polishing stones. There's various different stones, different grits for polishing pivots. And then this was a pivot support. They're brass. I haven't used these very much. You can see this, there's a groove and the size is on it. This is a size 4. So that would clamp into the tailstock, and half the pivot would be up above the groove so that you can polish it or file it, and it just gives us support for, they go right up to quite big ones. Those would be fairly easy to make yourself. The other thing that I find is important is my shop bag, because you're always filing, and since I'm doing this in the house, that dirt gets traveled, so I'm always
I'll give him a couple more minutes if we haven't heard from Wendell. I think he basically covered all he was going to cover today. But he may have some closing comments. So if we just hang on for a few seconds, perhaps he'll get back on. I don't know how to notify him that he's not online. I'll send him a quick email. Are there any questions? We can at least get those recorded, and Wendell can answer them next week if he doesn't come back online. I'll ask everybody to all unmute.
Yeah, I guess for me, does Wendell have any sources like where he gets some of the tools and the supplies and things like that he would recommend?
Okay, good question. He mentioned parents, but I know
Yeah.
there are several other suppliers. So I'm just looking at one today called where they do have a depth finder that they make. It's called Mile High Clock Parts. Somewhere in Colorado, I think.
I would think so by the mile high. Sounds like Denver.
So,
Any other questions or comments?
sometimes well, I often find that Wendell seems to know the catalog number of the parts he buys. So, with the Perrin's online catalog, sometimes it's hard to find stuff in there.
I know.
Partly because the things seem to have different names, but often Wendell has recorded the catalog number, and he's able to look it up. So that's really helpful if you want to order stuff from Perrin.
Right.
Like those little things with the microfiberglass strands,
Right.
for example.
Any other comments or questions?
That was a very helpful session.
I agree.
Yeah, it's interesting all the various tools he has. And if there's any, there were a couple of them that I think would be good to have demonstrations on. And so if you think of any, let me know or let Wendell know. And perhaps during the next series of sessions, we can get them demonstrated. But the object of the training sessions is to keep them at about an hour. And that's, to me, a good time limit. for concentration and so on. So without any other questions, we'll wrap it up, and it'll be at the same time next week, 3 o'clock. I'll send out the a Zoom invite as well.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Paul. Thank you.
All the best. Have a good week.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Thanks,
Oh, you're
Paul,
welcome.
and thank Wendell for us.
I will. Yeah.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Everybody take care.
Bye-bye.